Hi. Uh, okay.
You can edit after, don't worry.
Hi there, Bill Ference, and welcome to our conversation about the zeitgeist, about the actual situation, and at our site Cinéma Maison.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And just a few words of introduction. We're having this conversation around us with people from different backgrounds, having different points of view on the actual situation in Ukraine, in Europe. And we asked Bill to meet us because he has quite an interesting background in military, in U.S. military back in the 90s. And actually, Bill is a father of a friend of our daughter, Alex. So, like, we are meeting interesting people just in our area around us and having quite incredible backgrounds and interesting views on what's going on. So, Jelko, what would be the first question?
Bill, if you can just tell us, because you're an American, you've been in the US Army, and now you live in Canada.
Yeah.
If you can just tell us a bit how that came to pass.
Well, I'm originally from a military family in the United States. I served both in the US Army and the US Air Force. In the US Army, I was what's called a forward combat controller. And in the United States Air Force, I was a nuclear security specialist. I ended up in Canada because I used to be stationed at Plattsburgh Air Force Base. I married a Quebecer while I was stationed there. And then when I got out of the military on a medical discharge, we decided to come back to Canada instead of going to the United States. I was the seventh generation in my family to serve in the US military. I was born in Los Angeles, California, and then we were stationed in New Mexico, and then we were stationed in New Jersey, and then we were stationed in Arizona. And then after that, I joined the military myself. So, for me, it was just something I knew and I was familiar with. And I was looking at my options, no money for a university or anything, decided to go into the military.
You were in the active military during the first Gulf War, am I wrong?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And so how did that happen? What was your involvement? And
my involvement was mainly standing security on aircraft that were deployed down to Saudi Arabia. From our base, squadron was sent of F-16 fighters were sent down, and when the aircraft go, security goes with them along with the flight crews and maintenance and all that stuff. And like I said, it was mostly boring. Sand, very, very fine sand, like a talcum powder that just got everywhere, and constantly itching you. And that was it. It was pretty much a boring time, nothing special.
I'm curious, when you go out on a mission like that, which was quite an important one, what kind of info do you get as a soldier on the context of why you're going there?
Well, the context everyone knew, apparently Iraq attacked Kuwait and the United States wasn't happy about that, even though they had told Iraq, go ahead and attack Kuwait. So we were just given threat assessments, things to expect. Our main problem was Scud missiles. They'd hit several times at the base I was at. That and Bedouin tribesmen who got really upset because people were shooting their camels. So
shooting their camels?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I have to explain the concept of augmentees. What an augmentee is you take somebody who's an office clerk and you give them a weapon and tell them, yeah, go reinforce the perimeter. So these are people who have less weapons training than I did, and they were very nervous. And yeah, something moved out there in the middle of the night, they would just start shooting instead of asking someone for assistance. So yeah, the Bedouin would get upset about this and they would shoot back.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty Mad Max type stuff.
Yeah.
Were you still in the active military during the Second Gulf War?
No, no. I was medically discharged in 1992. I just had too many injuries, none of them combat related, just cumulative effect of training. To give an example, for someone in, like me in the same career field, my basic load that I would carry every day was about 30 kilos. Between my vest, my helmet, my weapon, ammunition, blah, 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 blah. 30 to 40 kilos was not an unusual thing. Depending on what was going on, it could go up to about 50, 60 kilos. And, you're running, you're jumping, you're hitting the ground because you're training with this equipment on. And it just, it just starts wearing down your body.
That's incredible. And did it change in 30 years?
From what I understand, the training has changed a lot. There's a lot more emphasis in preventing such injuries. So the newer equipment fits better. They pay a lot of attention to, believe it or not, foot support, making sure you have good arch support, things like that. I don't know about other militaries, but I do know that the U.S. military is very progressive about that. What's that called? Kinesiosport or orthosport, things like that. They have people who study these things and say, okay, well, we need to do this. We need to change that. Which is the difference between the U.S. military and the Russian military. It's my understanding that most of the Russian military are conscripts. They're told, guess what? You're going to join the military.
Yeah.
You're 18 years old. You're going in the military. I think Sweden also has a 2-year obligatory service.
That's why in France they're always talking of taking that out because it makes for poor quality troops and it costs a lot of money.
Yeah, and that you're seeing right now in Ukraine. I mean, people are looking at what's happening, but they're not looking at it in the sense of long term. What Russia just did is they showed the world they cannot go into a fight. Ukraine should have walked all over Ukraine, and a month later they're still trying to make a foothold there. And I think the real issue for Russia is now that other peer adversaries, say China, for example, who's very interested in their territory in the north, they just told China they can't fight. Especially because it's my understanding from what I was reading that they were actually asking China for military assistance. And that, that's a joke. The fact that they cannot put down Ukraine, I think what happened is they were thinking Ukraine would be another Georgia and Crimea, where they just went in, they took over the place. But that's not what happened. And the rest of the world is taking note of that.
Because you come from a military family, I don't know what your opinions on the soldier life were before you enlisted when you were younger.
Loved it.
And what are your opinions now? Like what's your perspective on the militaries and on the role of the military and
the military is a necessary evil. It would be really nice to live in a world where we did not need to have a military force. Unfortunately, there's always somebody doing something. So it's a necessary force. I am proud of my service to my country. I disagree with my reasons for joining now. In retrospect, I chose to go into what's called combat arms. I should have chosen to be an aircraft mechanic, a diesel mechanic, underwater welding. I mean, I had so many opportunities and I chose combat arms. And I really regret making that decision. If I were to go back in time, I would choose something that has more of a civilian application to it.
Mhm. So a profession that you can also practice
Transfer.
after your retreat from the army, for example.
Yeah, because aircraft mechanic, for example, I mean, they make ridiculous money. Diesel mechanics, the same thing, you know. And I had an opportunity to go in those career fields, and I didn't make the right choice, in my opinion.
But when you're young and you get in the military, like the nobler choice, or there's like a macho thing going on, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it was me trying to show everyone in my family that I was good enough. Mm-hmm. You know, I was tough enough, and I could make it in the big leagues. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I regret those decisions.
Do you think that a well-trained army can maintain some kind of restraint and respect the Geneva Convention and act in an okay way once things go down and it starts to get ugly?
Well, that's the point of having a professional army. If you look at both Iraq and Afghanistan, we had a couple instances in the U.S. where soldiers and various personnel went over the line and they committed what are unquestionably war crimes. But because it's a professional army, those people were found out and they were charged with these crimes. And most of them did prison time. You know, I'm looking at, I believe the city's name is Mariupol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mariupol. Yeah, that's right.
I'm looking at those attacks, and either Russia is willingly committing war crimes, or their fire control is absolute shit.
But you're right. That's what I heard, that they have no control, that their pilots are equipped with laser installation, but they can't use them for some reason. They're not up to date or not installed properly, and so they don't see what they do.
Yeah, the bombing of these civilian, locations. I mean, that's a very obvious war crime. That's a no-no. One of the first things you're taught going into the U.S. military is the Geneva Convention and the laws of war. And it's drilled into you at basic training, and then subsequently every year you have a follow-up training where you're reminded, these are the rules. Do not shoot at civilians, all right? Do not bomb civilians, try to avoid harming. It doesn't always happen. The tragedy of war is, as a general rule, it is the civilian population who suffers the most. Soldiers are trained to avoid getting hurt. It's just really terrible to watch and see all of these civilians being forced from their homes, all these people who are living a peaceful life. They have nothing to do with the politics of it. It's the same thing, what I was speaking to you earlier about, people discriminating against Russians here. Why? These people have nothing to do with it. They're living here. They're not supporting Vladimir Putin.
I saw some really good reporting from Vice News. One, they went into Irpin, one of the boroughs that are like northwest of Kyiv, and I saw in the reporting that some civilian vehicles had been completely shot. Dead people still on the ground, and another reporter was in it's Kharkiv, and she showed terrible things too, of the destruction of neighborhoods, of it's really terrible. I mean, so I don't know, and let's say that all the reporting that we get is really shows a picture that is awful of the Russian military right now. Like they're out of control. Some are deserting. Some old woman in Irpin, some soldier came in her house and they started using her clothing They were wearing like her coats and her.
Oh, I didn't see.
They took her money. They ate her food, and at some point, there's a drunk guy shot her husband's leg off with a shotgun just by accident, and she was interviewed in a hospital with her husband with a 1 foot missing beside her, and so like that's
a war crime.
That's really under control. They were looking for food, for heat. They were pillaging, basically.
Yeah. And what you just described is called a war crime by the Geneva Convention.
So we wonder when we see those things, like, is it certain events that happen that are blown out of proportion, or is it like the general attitude of the troops on the ground right now?
I would be inclined to believe the general attitude of the troops on the ground. Back in the 80s and 90s, even though the United States government, along with the Central Intelligence Agency, they were painting this picture of this horrible Russian, military ready to stomp on everyone. What we found during the treaties is an incapable force. One of the things, the INF, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, when our inspectors went over to look at the Russian equipment and for the treaty purposes, they found a centimeter of water down at the bottom of the silos. Okay. Yeah. When you're talking delicate electronics, you can't have humidity there. And the official assessment was that those missiles would never have launched, So, there's this constant thing where people are saying, well, Putin wants to bring back the old Soviet Union and bring Russia back to its old glory. But by retaining the system of corruption that is predominant throughout the Russian society, where, you have your oligarchs, and apparently they've been robbing the military blind. And now the military needs that stuff, and we ain't got it.
I see.
Yeah.
They're like, on paper, there's some ammunition somewhere, but when you open the door of the depot, there's nothing in there.
Yeah. I was thinking the other day, this is the contrast between Russian military and the American military contractors, is that American military contractors are unquestionably corrupt, but they know not to take too much. They understand there are limits to how much they should, scoop up in the pocket.
Yeah.
So it's when you have a corrupt system,
it can go really fast. Like the money can just be scattered to the wind.
Well, I keep seeing $500 million yachts, $700 million yachts. It's like, wow, that's nice,
Yeah.
But somebody's paying for it, and that's the Russian people. As sad as this sounds, Russia has a history of revolutions, and maybe it's time for Russia to have another revolution to deal with this problem.
And speaking of revolutions, there was the Orange Revolution in Ukraine and in other countries, like the Maidan Revolution. That's sort of sparked the whole thing off. So what's your take on all that talk about Nazis in Ukraine and this revolution and the role of the West with the expansion of NATO? I mean, do you buy into any of this?
Well, I mean, there's a lot there.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
The
whole conflict.
But that's what Putin is using as his pretext and his justification in front of his own people for why he's doing this.
But you will agree that there are like the situation, the geopolitical situation, like the states, the Ukraine, the NATO, the Russia, and then it's how Putin explains it all on the internal side, like this internal regime. It's like Donald things.
Donald Trump, fake news. This is the real story. And when you have control of the media, you can push that narrative. Going back to your question about NATO, it's like I was saying before, I do question why NATO keeps pushing closer and closer to the Russian border. This would unquestionably be a security concern for the United States or any other European country. If Russia was starting to move missiles closer and closer to them, they would freak out.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe there is some validity to Putin's main complaint that NATO keeps putting pressure on them. And
I get the feeling that things are worse since the Second Gulf War, because in that war, America was the aggressor and the bully. And it was a shock for us in Canada, and for many other people. The French were really reactive to that. And that's why French fries were sold as freedom fries after that. Because everybody just couldn't believe that the US would have such an arrogant and hegemonistic attitude openly, like blatantly, like, we're the strongest, you can't stop us, we're doing this, you're either with us or against us. And that was really
not
bad.
only did we go in, but we lied. America lied about
the fake news stuff.
Well, no, I mean that there were weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, I know, but it was a Trumpian, like, it's the playbook of all the dictators that want to build a war out of nothing, and now it was us doing it.
But the surprising thing is there are two very important lessons from both Iraq and Afghanistan, and that is you can no longer win a war unless you're willing to do it the Roman way, where you go in, you massacre the male population above the age of 12 and enslave everyone else. You cannot defeat an insurgency. The United States spent 20 years trying to defeat an insurgency, and you can't do it unless you're willing to just blatantly murder civilians. So that really makes me wonder why Putin would choose this approach, because this is a no-win situation.
At the same time, I'm like, I don't know you, but I see how diplomatics and like the comprehension between countries is a fail these days. Like I can't understand how it's escalated between states and Russia. Well, I know there is a context about this, but even now, this Biden on the border with Ukraine and Poland, like taking the kids in his arms, like how much does he want to put more of oil on this fire, to irritate Putin and to irritate Russians? Like he's like there. Maybe he'll go to Kiev and like shake hands with Zelensky. I don't know what does he hope to achieve with such a this attitude.
Yeah, what is his end game?
I suspect it's a lot of people started saying it, and Biden said it today, I think, in that speech he did in Warsaw. He said this man can't stay in power.
Yeah.
So his end game is the end of Putin.
Yeah.
And he said to the NATO members, he said, we're in this for the long run. This man cannot stay in power. That's pretty clear to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the real issue, I think the reason why he's said, okay, this region is what we're after, is because this way he can exit while saving some face. But I think the real problem for him going forward is going to be that other people who are looking to move into his slot, I think Putin's been in power, 30 years now?
Yeah, a bit less.
22 years.
Yeah, still a long time.
Still a long time.
Still a long time. There's people in the background who are like, okay, yeah, I can do this job. Let's get rid of him. Look at this. He just failed at this war. He's powerless. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going through his head right now, that there are people out there who are saying, yeah, let me take advantage of this loss.
Yeah.
Because there is no question Russia has already lost. They cannot win militarily without, like I said, mass murder of civilians, which is essentially what's going on anyway. yeah, there's no way for them to remain in to win the war.
That's a really good point, because as you said, in the olden days, in medieval times, in the ancient world, genocide wasn't a bad, like, it was just normal. It was just like, we vanquished you, so we killed the men and we used the women and the children.
Yeah.
But that is not acceptable nowadays. I don't see the world community doing absolutely nothing if there was a blatant genocide happening.
Yeah.
So it does change the nature of war.
Let's quantify that statement you just made. The world community will step up if it is white people.
Yes, absolutely.
Because one of the things I notice right now, everyone in Europe is, oh, I have a spare bed for a refugee from Ukraine. But when it was brown Muslim refugees coming up from Syria, they were putting barbed wire across their borders. All right. So there is a great deal of hypocrisy there in Europe where, if you're a white Christian, we'll find a place for you. But if you're a brown Muslim, you stay back down there.
Let's say my point was not really well thought out, but
no, I think it's a good point. It's a good point, but we do have to quantify it.
Yeah, and it's just that evolution is slow, and we're not good enough yet, but we made some progress when we compare, like, from 400 years ago or 500 years ago.
You're going to have to work on convince me on that.
or maybe 1,000 years ago. I don't know. We have to find the date.
We still find reasons to kill each other. That is the sad thing. And the thing is, we're going to see a lot more of this moving forward with climate change. It's going to reduce the resources available, especially food. If you look at California, where about a third of the vegetables and fruits in North America are grown, they're not growing that anymore. So food resources are going to become scarce, and that will lead to further conflicts down the road where people are fighting for land where they can grow food. Part of the problem with food prices right now is that there is less food from California. California was essentially the breadbasket of the United States. I mean, they grew everything except for like corn and wheat and soy.
Do you think that because, of course, Ukraine is bad, it's horrible, and it wakes a lot of people up too. People are waking up to the realities of geopolitics, and they're also, I think, being emotionally affected by something that's going on in a faraway country. And of course, it's for bad reasons, because it's white people. But there's a plus to that, is that it does wake up some people to say, okay, we're in a big world, and we're all related to one another. And the COVID crisis, the climate change crisis, all of these big challenges are challenges that the world has to face as united as possible. So there's, like, I don't know, I think a lot of people maybe some people are scared and feel paralyzed, as we did for a few weeks when it started. But I think everyone wants to do something to help things go on the right way.
Everyone wants to do something right up to the time it comes to doing something. I was watching the protests that happened the other day here in Montreal. And everyone's like, oh, this is, climate change. We got to do something. But people don't get off their asses and vote. All right. And therefore, we keep the same political system. We keep the same politicians in office. And we don't get any change. Like I said, their corporate sponsors are not interested in change. Their corporate sponsors, politicians' corporate sponsors, are only interested in continuing the same old.
Yeah, if you could, this vision, this idea of you, if the politicians had their, like,
the race car drivers with their logos, their sponsor logos, Shell Oil and Brembo brakes. we should have a law that politicians are required to wear their corporate sponsors on their jackets when they're campaigning. This way we can look at this and say, okay, I agree with this corporation. I'll support this politician. Because right now, we don't really know what a politician's motivation is. You know, they say something, but that's not what they mean, right? They're just, you know, an election, it's who can tell the most convincing lies, in my opinion. And I've always wanted to go up to a politician and say, how much? What is your price? Because us voters, we could get together, form, you know, do a Kickstarter or something so we can buy you from the corporations.
Oh, that's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good idea, I find. It's a really good idea. We should really do it.
Yeah, let's buy back a politician.
Yeah, exactly.
Bernie Sanders, that's what he doesn't get paid by the big corporations, and he uses a lot of grassroots money.
Yep.
And I totally agree with you. When this war started, we wrote a post on our website, and we said that to our followers, that we wanted to take some time to digest this war and see what we can do to help. And I, in that post, we said that it's becoming critical that the regular people like us put money where our mouth is. We should basically have a budget. You know, you have a budget. Let's say you put $100 per month on different things that you want to fund. It could be a politician. It could be, you know, a food bank. It could be some Médecins Sans Frontières. It could be sending stuff to Ukraine, whatever you want. But it's just that even if it's just $20, we're millions. Our advantage is that we're a lot of people. So if people just make it a habit and it becomes like a new social norm, that it's totally normal, you pay your Netflix, you pay your this and that, and you pay for things that you believe in. You invest in the future, but with your money, not just your vote.
Do that with a lot of small projects that I follow, whether it's 3D printing or various things. I find a project, I like it, and I'll contribute to that project throughout the year. I'll say, okay, this year I'm contributing this, this, and this. And as you were saying, you know, with Netflix and the various streaming services that I subscribe to, I can give something back that's going to help development of things that I like.
Yeah.
And it does have an impact. It's just, you know, those dollars make a difference.
Yeah. And what we would need to do, though, is to have it arranged so that a politician understands, well, 1 million people gave $20. That's 1 million voters. All right. That is something a politician will listen to. 1 million voters willing to give up $20. That is something they will listen to. All right. But you and me on the street, you know, they'll do the same nonsense. Oh, hi, how are you? Yeah, great. Yeah, please get out there and vote. And as a veteran, I literally put my life on the line so that people would have the right to vote. All right. And to protect those rights to vote. So when I see people are not voting, I get really irritated because, yes, I understand it's a pain in the ass to go and stand in line, blah, blah, blah. But look what we have because we won't go out and stand in line. It's like I said to you, we get the government we deserve. And if you're not willing to get off your butt and vote, then you get the government you deserve. You know, it may not be the government you want, but you were not willing to do something about that. You know, unlike Russia, we have choices here. And, you know, I think it's ridiculous that we will not, as a society, I think it's Australia, everyone is required to vote. They have a law there.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It's either Australia or New Zealand, but they have a vote law that, no, you're going out to vote.
I would combine that with the jacket with the logo. Say, we want full transparency. We're going to make that effort, but in exchange, you get you get off your couch and you go vote.
Let's get politicians out there with their Exxon logos. Yeah, we support Exxon oil. Screw the environment. At least we know where you're coming from. You look at Joe Manchin in Virginia. Even though nobody wants coal, those coal miners are voters, and they do vote. And they voted him into office, and he's going to keep pushing coal to keep these people with their jobs, even though they're horrible jobs. I was listening to Hillary Clinton when she was running for president, and she was talking about how we're going to just get rid of those jobs, blah, blah. What she should have said is, we're going to get rid of those jobs, but we will replace those jobs with something better, something that will give you a future, something a lot less dangerous for you and your children.
Where is this vision of the better future? We don't have the vision, the positive vision by intelligent people at power giving this vision.
We're thinking putting people on Mars, but we're driving vehicles based on 150-year-old technology. And that includes electric cars, because they tried electric cars in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So we can't do better. We're going to Mars, but we cannot do better here. There's no logic to that.
Yeah. So do you think we're coming to kind of a tipping point where, like, we have the technology, we have the intelligence, we have the money to make things, and on the other hand, this war is like the 19th century all over again. So like two worlds, like maybe right now collision in front of our eyes. I have a feeling like that I thought we were so much further, and now actually not. So maybe it will be a very painful moment, a transitional moment. And do you think we are right now maybe in it, and it will we'll be able to get there?
We're really at that tipping point right now, where we have the huge climate change, and that's going to bring more conflict, as I was explaining earlier. Will we survive as a species? It's a scary thought.
You're right. I was looking kind of.
We guess that you're a pessimist.
Yeah, I'm pessimistic, but that's because I understand the science really, really well.
Yeah, so that's sad. Yeah, because exactly,
I'm an optimistic, so I will counter that by saying that when things get really, really hairy, the capacity of rebounding of the human species is enormous. And
that is,
I do think it's a tipping point, and I do think we can totally fail, and that the bad outcome can happen. That's really a possibility. But I think that everybody that's awake needs to push hard so we tip on the right side.
That's my one hope, is that humanity in general, we're incredibly creative, inventive species. And when we're presented with a challenge, most of the time we find a way to get around it. In the past, we've had several energy crises where wood no longer works, so we switched to charcoal. Charcoal wasn't enough, we switched to coal. Coal wasn't enough, we switched to oil. Oil wasn't enough, we switched to nuclear power plants. So, and right now they're talking about fusion power plants. So to me, that is our hope, that right now there's some young kid who's looking at this and chooses the right career field and finds something that saves humanity from itself. Because if we don't, we got a real problem.
Thank you so much. And I so agree with, as you say, you have to do something and to maybe to fight for what we have. Like, maybe it's really the time to see it as a fight situation right now.
And take a stand. Yeah.
And we'll put some links in the description of the video.
Yeah.
Just ideas of I don't know, things that we contribute to and that maybe other people would want to get involved as well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but
Okay,
people need to
great.
get involved. They need
Yeah.
to get involved. Don't depend on everyone else to carry the weight for you.
Mhm.
Once again, you get the government you deserve.